I overheard my stepdaughter tell my wife, "He's dying soon. You don't have to care for him again." My wife responded, "I married him for better and for worse. I can't leave him at such a time when he needs me most." 2 weeks later, the unexpected happened. I will tell you how everything unfolded. First, let me quickly thank you for your continuous support. This means a lot to us. If you enjoy the stories we share, kindly subscribe to this channel. It will be great if you can leave a comment on which city you are watching from. We might just give you a shout-out in our next story. Today's special shout-out goes to Elizabeth Gibbs. We are glad you enjoy our stories. Now let's go deeper into the story. My name is Richard Sloan, and for most of my adult life, I built things, businesses, homes, and what I thought were unbreakable relationships. I wasn't a billionaire, but I didn't need to be. By 58, I had a regional construction firm that provided jobs for over 300 people, 2 homes, and a wife who made the end of my first marriage feel like a lesson instead of a loss. Her name was Linda. We met at a fundraiser in Chicago. She was calm, collected, a school administrator who carried herself like someone who'd spent years managing chaos without ever raising her voice. She had one daughter from a previous marriage, Tasha, who was just 29 when we met. I didn't have kids of my own, and there was a silent part of me, one I never voiced aloud, that hoped I could fill a paternal role. Not replace her father, no, but become someone she could lean on. God, how naive that now sounds. When I appointed Tasha as CEO of my company 4 years ago, people said I was generous. Truth is, I was trying to solidify what we had as a family. She was bright, MBA from Northwestern, worked in 2 startups, articulate in boardrooms. Linda beamed with pride every time Tasha presented at our annual meetings. And when I announced my semi-retirement, she hugged me like a daughter would, kissed my cheek, and whispered, "I'll make you proud." I believed her. I really did. But something changed when I got sick. I was diagnosed with a bacterial infection that ravaged my body for weeks. Hospital, then rehab, then home care. I went from walking 3 miles a day to needing help just to shower. That was when the tone in the house shifted, not from Linda, never from her, but from Tasha. She visited less. When she did, it was brief, transactional. I chalked it up to her being busy. The business was in her hands now. She had to step up. I had to let go. Then came that night. I was on my way to the downstairs bathroom. It was around 11:30 p.m. I moved slowly, cane in hand, my balance still off. That's when I heard them, Tasha and Linda, in the kitchen. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop. I just froze when I heard my name. I stood in the hallway, barely breathing. "He's dying soon," Tasha said, her voice low but cutting. "You don't have to keep playing nurse. You did your part. Don't let this ruin the rest of your life." Linda didn't answer right away. I could hear her pouring tea. The clink of the spoon against the mug was louder than it should have been. "I married him for better and for worse," she said, finally. "And this is the worst. But I can't leave him at such a time when he needs me most. That would destroy me." The silence that followed was heavier than anything I've ever known. I didn't move. I didn't blink. I felt everything collapse in me all at once. Not from Linda's response, no, but from the casual cruelty in Tasha's tone. I wasn't a man to her. I was a burden, a clock ticking down. And the woman I trusted most with my legacy had already started counting the minutes until I was gone. I shuffled back to my room and shut the door quietly. That night, I stared at the ceiling until dawn, every word replaying like an echo I couldn't escape. I didn't confront them. Not then. Not the next day. I acted like nothing happened. Let them bring me soup and fluff my pillows. Let them pretend. I had my lawyer come to the house under the guise of reviewing estate documents. What I really asked him was how airtight my power of attorney and succession documents were. Could I change them discreetly? Could I undo what I'd handed over? "Yes," he said, "but there'll be fallout." "Let it fall," I replied. Over the next 2 weeks, I got stronger. My appetite returned. I started walking without assistance. Tasha barely noticed, too busy signing contracts and hosting investors. Linda noticed, though. She never asked how I improved so fast. She just watched me with quiet suspicion, like she knew something was coming but didn't dare name it. Then came the day I decided to stop pretending. I asked Linda to schedule a family meeting. "Estate stuff," I told her. "I want everything in order. She nodded, still unreadable. Tasha showed up 30 minutes late with her laptop and a Starbucks cup. All right, she said, plopping down in my office chair like she owned the place. Let's do this. I've got a call at 4. I looked at her for a long time. Her face was polished, poised, confident. I remembered when I used to be proud of her. Now, I just saw the stranger I'd welcomed into my home and given the keys to everything. But I'll save the rest for that chapter. The irony was that as my body grew stronger, my heart grew colder. There's something unnerving about pretending to smile at someone after they've told your wife they're just waiting for you to die. I moved through the house like a shadow, performing gratitude, offering politeness where it wasn't deserved. I kept the rod inside me, like a splinter buried too deep to dig out without tearing flesh. I didn't even journal. I was afraid that if I wrote it down, it would become too real. I needed to stay quiet, to gather strength and clarity before I made my move. Tasha didn't suspect a thing. She was too busy being the queen of the empire I built. My days started early, around 6:30 a.m. I'd sit on the back porch wrapped in a blanket, watching the dew lift from the grass. The silence helped. In those still moments, I planned. Every conversation she'd had with investors documented. Every recent business decision reviewed. I wasn't just cutting her off emotionally. I was preparing to gut her professionally. It wasn't petty. It was surgical. She had called me a dying man, disposable, replaceable. Fine. Then she would lose every benefit that came with being in my good graces. Linda brought me coffee those mornings. She never asked what I was thinking. But I could tell she felt the shift. Her steps grew more tentative. Her hugs lingered longer. There was no confrontation, just a quiet drifting. I hated that. I hated what Tasha's words had stolen from our home. One morning, my lawyer, Patrick Hale, came by under the guise of delivering paperwork from the firm. In truth, we had a list to go through, a cold, calculated purge. I was seated at the dining room table, a notepad beside me and a pen I twisted in my fingers like a trigger. She's got control over the operating budget, Richard, Patrick warned. If you want her out as CEO, you need a board meeting and a formal motion. You're still chairman, which gives you leverage. But it won't be pretty. I nodded. Then we do it fast, and we do it legal. I want her title revoked and a severance package that offers nothing. Patrick looked up, hesitated. She's your stepdaughter. Are you sure you want to cut her out of the will too? I looked him dead in the eye. I heard what she said to my wife. She doesn't see me as a father. She sees me as a countdown. He folded the paperwork slowly. Understood. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because I doubted what I was doing, but because I had never truly accepted that someone I gave so much to could see me as nothing more than an obstacle. That's what stung the most. Not betrayal. Not greed. But how utterly small I must have seemed in her eyes for her to feel safe enough to say it. Like I was already gone. Already buried. A week later, I started attending board calls again. I didn't tell Tasha. I had my assistant loop me in silently. I listened to her posture and bluff, watched her navigate questions about our expansion plans without even a hint of hesitation. She was confident, too confident. She had assumed my silence was surrender. That was her mistake. Because I wasn't fading. I was sharpening. Linda found me in my office one afternoon, scrolling through emails. She leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. You've changed, she said softly. I didn't look up. I'm healing. That's not what I mean. I finally met her eyes. I know. She stepped in, placed a hand on my shoulder. I didn't agree with what Tasha said. You heard me. I told her I wouldn't leave you. I did hear you, I said. And I believe you. But I also heard how comfortable she was saying it. That didn't come out of nowhere. Linda sat down across from me. Her eyes shimmered with unspoken conflict. She's scared. She lost her father when she was young. She doesn't know how to process illness. She's 33, Linda, I snapped. She's not a child. And fear doesn't justify cruelty. We sat in silence after that. A long, heavy pause that said everything neither of us had the energy to argue. When she finally stood up, I didn't stop her. She left the room with her head bowed, and I stared at the door long after she was gone. That evening, I sent a secure email to Patrick authorizing the formal removal procedures. It felt like placing a death sentence. Only I wasn't killing her. I was killing the version of myself that had once hoped she could become family. 2 days before the family meeting, I received a voicemail from one of our board members. Richard, Just wanted to say, it's good to hear your voice again. I was starting to think you'd left us for good. Heard some interesting rumors about who might take the company forward. Glad to see you're still at the wheel. I smiled at that. It wasn't much, but it was a confirmation that I hadn't disappeared. Tasha's power play hadn't gone unnoticed. And soon, she'd know that too. I looked at myself in the mirror that night. The weight I'd lost had come back. My cheeks weren't sunken anymore. My eyes, once cloudy with fatigue, were sharp again. I wasn't just healthy. I was ready. The morning of the meeting felt like waiting for a storm you knew would hit, but still left the windows open. I woke early, the way I used to before big investor calls, stomach tight, mind sharp. This wasn't business, though. This was family. Or whatever tattered, conflicted version of family we were pretending to be. I took my time getting dressed. Navy slacks, a white-collared shirt, the same watch I wore to my wedding with Linda. I looked in the mirror and told myself one last time. She did this. You didn't. Linda brewed coffee without saying much. She'd been quiet since our conversation 2 nights ago, choosing distance over argument. I respected that. She wasn't the one on trial today. Still, I felt her tension in the way she set the mugs down, gentler than usual, like noise might crack the already fragile piece. She watched me for a moment and finally said, "Are you sure about this?" "As sure as I've ever been," I said without flinching. "She'll understand why." "Will she?" she asked, almost like she didn't want the answer. I didn't respond. The truth was, I didn't care anymore if Tasha understood. I wasn't looking for remorse. I was cutting out rot. Tasha arrived late, of course. Not obscenely so, but enough to make an entrance. She wore a navy blue pantsuit and heels that clicked confidently across the tile. She was all polish and posture, carrying her laptop like a briefcase of war strategies. No one would have known she was walking into her own reckoning. "Sorry," she said breezily. "Traffic was insane. What's this about again? You sounded serious." I didn't smile. "Sit down, Tasha." She raised an eyebrow, glanced at Linda, then took her seat at the end of the table, my seat, before I stepped down. I took a long sip of coffee and then began. "I've been watching everything these past few weeks. Recovering, yes, but not blind. And certainly not deaf." Tasha tilted her head, confusion flickering across her face. "Okay. I heard what you said to Linda," I said, flatly. "That I was dying soon. That she didn't have to care for me anymore. That I was, what was it? A burden." Her face froze. She blinked slowly. Linda shifted beside me but didn't speak. The silence was a third presence in the room. "I didn't mean it like that," Tasha said quickly, her voice rising slightly. "It was late. I was stressed. We were just talking." "No," I interrupted. "You were revealing. That's what people do when they think no one is listening. They tell the truth." "Richard, I gave you everything," I said, voice hardening. "Not because I had to. Because I believed in you. I wanted this family to work. I wanted you to have a legacy. You were the daughter I never had. And you," I pointed slowly across the table, "spoke about me like I was already gone." Her lips parted, but she had nothing to say. Nothing that could undo what had already been done. "I've met with my lawyer. You are no longer the CEO. Effective immediately." That hit like a slap. Her eyes went wide, color draining from her face. "You can't do that," she said. "You'd have to call a board meeting, vote me out." "I already have," I said. "The board meeting was held this morning at 8 a.m. Unanimous vote. You're out." Linda gasped beside me. Tasha's mouth opened again, but I wasn't finished. "And I've removed you from my will," I said, quiet and final. "There will be no inheritance, no severance, no trust fund. I gave you the keys to the kingdom, and you showed me exactly what I meant to you. I won't reward that." The silence that followed was suffocating. Tasha stared at me like I'd slapped her. Her whole body stiffened, her fingers clenched tightly around the arms of the chair. "You can't be serious," she whispered. "Oh, I'm painfully serious," I said. "Linda," she turned to her mother, voice cracking. "You're going to let him do this?" Linda didn't answer immediately. She looked down at her hands, folded in her lap. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft but firm. "I told you he needed us. That this wasn't the time to abandon him. You didn't listen." Tasha stood abruptly, the chair screeching against the tile. Her composure cracked, and for the first time, I saw panic, not defiance, in her face. You're throwing me away? She said, voice shrill. After everything I've done for this family? I stood too slowly. No, Tasha. You threw me away. I just finally picked it up and noticed. She stormed out, heels clacking like gunfire down the hallway. Linda didn't follow her. Neither did I. After the door slammed, Linda sat in stunned silence. The air was heavy with the sound of a bridge burned. I looked at her, searching for something, blame, maybe. But she looked hollow, and I suddenly felt tired. She'll call, Linda said after a moment. She'll try to fix it. She's already broken it, I said. There's no coming back from that. The silence after Tasha left didn't feel like peace. It felt like the silence in a funeral home, tense, polished, and waiting for someone to say the wrong thing. I sat in my office the rest of the afternoon, not even pretending to work. The decision had been made. The words had been spoken, but my body still buzzed with adrenaline. I replayed the scene over and over in my head, hearing each line in her voice, wondering if I'd missed something, wondering, ridiculously, if there'd been some hidden cry for help in her cruelty. But no, that was a lie I couldn't afford anymore. She hadn't lashed out in fear. She'd spoken with ease, like she'd already filed me away in her memory as almost dead. That evening, my phone rang. I didn't recognize the number. I let it go to voicemail. 10 minutes later, another call. Then another. All from different numbers. She must have been using burner lines or borrowed phones, trying to catch me off guard. By 8 p.m., I had 4 voicemails. I sat on the porch, stared at the darkening sky, and finally pressed play. The first one started with silence. Then her voice came through, strained, unsteady. Richard, it's me. I don't know what to say. I didn't mean it the way it sounded. I was just venting. I was overwhelmed. You were sick, and I panicked. I didn't think you'd hear that. I was just talking to Mom. I didn't mean it. I paused it there. Sat still. Let the weight of it settle. She didn't say she was sorry. Just that I wasn't supposed to hear it. There's a difference. The second message was angrier, desperate. You can't just erase me like that. I gave 4 years of my life to that company. I saved contracts you were going to lose. You know I did. And this is how you treat me? Like a criminal? Like I never mattered. I laughed bitterly. So now she was the victim. The third one was quieter. Sadder. You were like a father to me. I know I never said that, but I looked up to you. I always wanted you to be proud of me. I guess I just never knew how to say it. And now I've ruined everything. I let that one play to the end. My hand trembled slightly, not from second-guessing, but from the cruel irony. I had been proud of her, until I saw who she really was when she thought I wouldn't hear. The mask was off now, and nothing she said could glue it back on. The fourth voicemail came late, 11:48 p.m. I was in bed, the house dark. Linda lay beside me, facing away, her breathing shallow and still. I put in headphones and listened. I miss you. I miss our talks. I know you probably hate me. I hate myself too. Please, can we meet? Just once? You don't have to give anything back. I just want a chance to explain. I wasn't raised to be like this. I don't know what happened to me. Please, Richard. Please call me. I didn't. I deleted it. Not out of anger. Out of necessity. I knew what would happen if I met her face to face. She'd cry, maybe reach for my hand. She'd remind me of holidays we spent together, of the times we laughed over bourbon in my study. And I'd almost believe her. Almost. And then I'd remember the hallway. Her voice, cold and practical, telling her mother to stop caring because my clock was ticking. The next morning, I found Linda in the kitchen, staring blankly at her coffee. Her face was puffy, red-rimmed eyes that told me she'd listened to her own set of messages. She's spiraling, she said softly. She's manipulating, I countered. She's both, she admitted. She wants to fix it. I don't. I said it without malice, without heat. Just finality. She looked at me, searching for softness. I didn't give it. She's my daughter, Richard. And I'm your husband. We stood like that for a long time. No raised voices. Just grief stretching between us like an elastic band, waiting to snap. Later that afternoon, my old business partner, Elliot, stopped by. He was the kind of man who didn't knock, just shouted, "You alive, old man," and walked in with a bottle of bourbon and a grin. I was grateful for the distraction. He poured 2 glasses and raised his brow. So, you finally took the knife out of your back, Huh? I chuckled. Something like that. He sipped and leaned back. I always liked Tasha, but she got cocky. We all saw it. She was walking around like she founded the damn company. Forgot whose name is on the building. I gave her too much too fast, I said. No, he shook his head. You gave her enough. She just didn't know what to do with it. That landed. That was the truth. I keep waiting to feel bad, I admitted, waiting for the guilt to show up. But it hasn't. It won't, he said, because what you did wasn't about revenge. It was about clarity. You saw her clearly. That's all. Doesn't mean it won't hurt. Just means it had to be done. When he left, I sat with those words. Clarity. That's what I had now. And sometimes, clarity came at the cost of closeness. The next few weeks passed in a slow, gray silence. Not the kind that brings peace, but the kind that eats at you from the inside. Quiet dinners, separate mornings, the occasional brush of shoulders without eye contact. Linda and I still lived in the same house, still moved through the same routines, but we weren't together. Not really. Something had broken the night of the meeting, and now it hovered between us, unnamed but ever-present. I knew she didn't blame me, not fully, but I also knew she was mourning something I couldn't bring back. A version of her daughter. A version of our family. I couldn't join her in that grief. I had already buried mine. One night, about 3 weeks after the fallout, I came home from the office and found her sitting on the edge of the bed, her phone clutched tightly in both hands. Her eyes were glassy. Her mouth opened, closed, then opened again, like she was fighting herself. She called again, she said softly. This time, she didn't yell. She just cried. I said nothing. I took off my watch, set it on the dresser, and waited. She said she hasn't eaten properly in days. That she's having panic attacks. That she can't sleep because she keeps hearing your voice from the meeting. She should have thought about that before she decided I was dead weight, I said. Linda flinched. Not dramatically, just a small, involuntary twitch, like the words had grazed a raw nerve. She's hurting, Richard. So was I. She looked at me then, and I saw it. Guilt, pain, but mostly confusion. She was trapped between two loyalties, each pulling her apart from the other. One was blood, the other was bond. And no matter how carefully she tried to balance them, one would always feel like betrayal. I don't want to lose her, she whispered. And I didn't want to lose us, I said. But she made that choice easier when she showed me exactly what I meant to her. Linda stood and crossed her arms. Do you honestly believe she never loved you? That none of it was real? I believe she loved what I gave her, I said, my voice low. The power, the title, the safety net. But love doesn't speak the way she did. Love doesn't plan for your absence like it's a financial transaction. She sat back down, her body folding inward like a paper crane collapsing underwater. You're right, she said. I keep wondering where I went wrong. What I didn't teach her. How I let this happen. I moved toward her, gently took her hand. Don't blame yourself. People choose who they become. She had every opportunity to be better. She nodded, tears spilling now. She didn't sob. Just quiet, steady weeping. The kind that comes from realizing something is truly gone. Later that week, she asked if she could visit Tasha. Not to negotiate, she clarified. Just to see her. I didn't stop her. I didn't want to control who she loved. I only knew who I couldn't welcome back. She left early on a Saturday, and I stayed home, restless. The silence felt different without her. Colder. Like a house waiting to be sold. I kept checking my watch, wondering how long she'd be gone, what she'd see, what she'd hear. I didn't know if I feared that she'd return angry or broken. All I knew was that the woman who came back wouldn't be the same one who left. She returned just after dark. Her shoulders slumped. I shadowed with something I couldn't quite name. She's not well, she said quietly. She's lost weight. Her apartment's a mess. She didn't even get off the couch when I arrived. I waited. She asked if you hate her. I don't hate her, I said. I just can't trust her. And that's worse. Linda sat down heavily in the armchair. She asked if I could try to talk to you. Not to reverse anything, but to soften, to leave a door open. I shook my head. That door burned the moment she used my illness to plot her inheritance. She said she's not the same person she was then. She was always that person. I just didn't want to see it. Linda didn't argue. She just stared at the floor, like she'd been caught between tides and finally stopped swimming. I told her I love her, she said after a while. But I also told her I wasn't going to undo what you did, that I understood why you did it, that I would have done the same if I were in your place. I looked up sharply. That was the first time she'd said it. The first time she admitted I hadn't been cruel, I'd been right. And I asked. She cried, she said. And then she said I chose you over her. And what did you say? I said I chose me, that I chose peace. And that the version of her who said those things doesn't belong in our lives right now. She finally looked at me then, her eyes tired but clear. I didn't say forever. I didn't make promises. I just said not now. That was enough for me. We sat in silence again, but this one was different. It wasn't heavy. It was honest. And in its quiet, I felt the smallest shift, like something between us had started to repair. Months passed. Slowly at first, then faster as the season shifted and the dust finally settled around the wreckage of what we used to call family. Tasha never called again, not directly. No more voicemails, no more desperate apologies. I occasionally heard from mutual acquaintances that she'd moved to a smaller firm in St. Louis, taking a non-executive role far below the pedestal I once placed her on. Word got around, of course. The board knew what had happened, though no one spoke about it directly. Some said I'd acted harshly. Others said I should have done it sooner. But no one disputed that it was final. In business, actions speak louder than explanations. And I had been deafeningly clear. What lingered wasn't the backlash, it was the space she left behind. Her absence echoed in every room where we used to pretend to be something close to whole. No more Sunday brunches. No more shared holiday plans. No more of that tightrope walking tension where I tried too hard and she cared too little. There was grief, but it wasn't for her. It was for the illusion. For the family I thought I had. That kind of grief doesn't come in sharp bursts, it seeps. It becomes part of the air, part of the quiet. And eventually you learn to live around it. Linda and I changed, too. Not in a way that broke us, but in the way people change after they survive a house fire. We rebuilt differently. More honestly. We didn't pretend anymore. Not about what we felt, or what we could handle. She stopped trying to justify Tasha's behavior, and I stopped holding her at arm's length for things she couldn't control. We didn't talk about forgiveness. We talked about boundaries. And that made all the difference. One evening, I found an old photo in a storage box, me, Linda, and Tasha at a company gala from years ago. I was smiling like a man who thought he'd won at life. Tasha had her hand on my shoulder. Linda stood between us, radiant. I stared at that photo for a long time. Not with longing, not with regret. Just recognition. That man in the photo didn't know what I know now. He didn't understand that generosity without discernment can be dangerous. That love, when handed out like a blank check, can bankrupt a person's soul. I didn't rip it up. I didn't frame it either. I put it back in the box and slid it under the bed. Some memories deserve to fade without force. Around Thanksgiving, we hosted a small dinner. Just close friends, no extended family. Linda cooked the way she always did, humming under her breath as she moved through the kitchen like a quiet storm. There was laughter, soft music, the kind of ease we hadn't felt in over a year. At one point, as she poured wine into my glass, she leaned in and whispered, "This feels good. Just us." I nodded, touched her hand. It does. We didn't say more. We didn't have to. The peace spoke for itself. Still, consequences have a way of rippling outward. A month later, a distant cousin sent me a screenshot of a post Tasha had made on some private social media platform. It was vague, but pointed. A long, dramatic caption about betrayal, power, and being discarded by people who pretend to be protectors until you show weakness. She didn't name me, but I knew. Everyone who mattered knew. I stared at it for a moment, then closed my phone. No response. No anger. Just quiet. That post wasn't for me, it was for her. A signal flare in a sea of curated sympathy. Let her have it. Let her create her version. I no longer needed to correct it. The company moved forward without her. Our new CEO, a quiet, focused woman named Miriam, brought a kind of stability we hadn't seen in years. Profits climbed, employee satisfaction soared, and for the first time since I stepped down, I felt proud of what we'd become, not just because we were growing, but because we were honest, transparent, clean. I had reclaimed my legacy from the hands of someone who saw it as her inheritance, not her responsibility. One afternoon, I sat in the garden with Elliot. He smoked a cigar while I sipped lemonade. The sky was low and heavy with early spring air. "You ever think she'll come back?" he asked. "Not in the way that matters," I said. He nodded. "Good. You've come too far to open old wounds." "I'm not angry anymore," I admitted. "Just done. And that feels better than forgiveness ever could." He smiled, slow and approving. "That's because you didn't just cut her off. You reclaimed yourself." That night, I lay beside Linda and thought about everything we'd survived. Not just the betrayal, but the way it forced us to redefine what love meant. Love wasn't about covering for each other. It was about facing the fire and still choosing to stand close. Tasha had burned her bridge, and Linda didn't try to rebuild it. That was love, too. I whispered into the dark, "Thank you for staying." She turned, kissed my shoulder, and said, "Thank you for not leaving yourself behind." And with that, we slept, together, honest, and finally whole. Sometimes, the hardest boundaries we set are with the people we once called family. But when someone shows you they only value you when you're strong, you have every right to protect your peace when you're vulnerable. I stood up for myself not out of revenge, but out of clarity. And in doing so, I found the love that truly lasted, my own. If you've ever had to choose peace over people-pleasing, share your story in the comments. Let's talk about it. See you soon in the next story.